The one thing that is happening is competitions, and we had prepared for competitions. We started our preparation in around November last year. We started the conversation. We actually attended, or some of us got to attend some competition-based environments outside of our club, our direct ecosystem. So we were really well planned. By January, we had down exactly what we wanted to achieve, and now comps have come. So quickly, conversation on. So there's our preparation. We prepared for 3 to 5 months. Conversation on comps on the student experience. I'll start with Sir Seamus.
Yep. So most of the development at our club is just around people's own individual martial arts journey. And when somebody expresses an interest in getting into the tournament scene, we got to have that conversation about why they want to get into it and that kind of thing. I've got a couple senior belts who have been training for quite a while and are now looking at kind of polishing off their skills with that tournament experience. And I've got one guy who's a junior belt, but he came in from day one saying, I want to eventually get into some kind of tournament or competition to see where I'm at. And so we've been working with him specifically. He's been doing our sparring course at Heathcote and things like that. And he's been working on his sparring skills and getting up. And now it's time for him to have that little test and a little bit of taste. And so the club is going to support him. We'll go out and support him on the day and see how he goes. But we'll make sure he gets through it and then grows from there, whatever his experience is.
Great. But so specifically for your club, let's be honest, you're not a competition club.
No.
You're a club focused on martial arts development and grading. That is attending a tournament, not a competition-based club.
Yeah, we're looking at the tournament as a learning experience and a complement to our training, but we're not training to compete.
You're not trained to compete. Okay. And so, Dimma, before we go over sorry. Yeah. And jumping over to Dimma, you've obviously done really well in competitions.
Sometimes, sir.
Sometimes. So, just for any viewers out there, yes, Dimma did win his last BJJ comp. It wasn't the Black Belt World Champions, but it was still a competition at the at a good level. It was a 3 to 5 star tournament. I think they got star ratings. And you went from the BJJ circuit, and then you crossed the tournament floor over to the kickboxing group.
It's a short walk, but yeah.
Short walk. And how'd you go in the kickboxing?
I won.
You won. So you won the BJJ and the kickboxing. Nice. Well done. Yeah. Now, for your students competing, positives and negatives for their journey, and you might be able to reflect on your own journey as a younger person when you were not just a student, but when your lifestyle was as a student, the experience there really quickly.
I think it can be a positive considering it might be the next avenue someone wants to take with us. So as you said, we're not a competition club, but it doesn't mean that people can't compete. And I think it's good that we do offer a way for them to compete. Yes. Having that avenue is really important, whether we're a competition club or not. Mm-hmm. I think it is quite a humbling experience reflecting back on when I was more junior. I did feel like I would like to do some competing, which I did, and it did open my eyes to where I was in my training, which is really, really, I think was beneficial, but then also helped me know what to do from then. And obviously at the beginning I was no good, but I kept with it and had some success later on. So I felt like the benefits were long term, whereas the humbling experience was something I had to get over very fast.
So, and I think probably for the student experience, that I think you just nailed it. The benefits were long term and slow to come, but that first experience is probably for the majority of people going to be somewhat negative or a struggle or a challenge. We can use all those words, but really what we're saying is it's a tough day on that first experience. I think the really important, if we're going to go down the competition route, is that students and parents, if they're younger, and their friends even, are pre-prepared with expectation of what's going to occur. We should be having that conversation probably a month in advance. Hey, you're going to competition. I've got a very specific couple of sentences I say. I always explain to the parent and to the student, this competition is not a competition. It's your first one. You are only there to learn what it feels like to bow onto a mat with lots of people watching. There's going to be people watching. Part of the experience is the circuit and the environment, not just the competition with one-on-one. So your first challenge is actually just the environment. And I really frame that it's a learning experience a lot rather than a competition moment, which I think is what we're describing here. Okay, so that's for the student. For the group or your club culture, can be a positive, can be a negative. I'll talk about where I've seen it as a negative, but Seamus, what are some of the things that you do to facilitate being a positive club event for your environment?
Yeah, well, leading up to it, you've got to kind of promote the event and let people know it's happening, encourage them to attend and support those who are going to be competing. Once they get there, making sure that they're together and bonding on the floor, moving from venue to venue, watching whichever students are competing and supporting them.
So you support your group going from, if there's 5 rings, for example, you guys attend at ring 1 and then move over to ring 2 when
absolutely
Billy's competing, then Nancy's competing, let's go over there.
Yeah. We're amongst and support them, and whether they win or lose, it doesn't matter. You can't make it about the winning or the losing. Like you said before, it's about the learning and then going back afterwards and unpacking what it is you learned and putting that into further development.
Yeah, that's great. Yep. And so Dima, what do you do? Do you do anything differently, or are you pretty much the same as making it that group event?
Exact same. I find it being a group event is much easier for the individual. So going there alone can be quite confronting and quite hard if they do lose, which does happen quite often. So having that support group and make it almost like a team event is much more beneficial for the individual and the group to see their peers thrive or fall same. It's all very beneficial, and it makes the day better. Being there with a group makes the day better.
Yeah. It's the fun of the event.
There's a couple of things that I'll also unpack. I have seen competitions have a negative impact on a club, and one of those occasions was, and I won't name the club, but I did go there and I had somebody else, one of the other students, comment to me as I was a visiting instructor, and they said, it's if you win a comp, you go up on a pedestal. And there were this club did indeed attend a lot of competitions, and they did perform very, very well, I'll be honest. They're a really good performing club. But once somebody had won a competition of any sort, then everyone, the head coach would sort of make a big deal about, we're all to clap for Johnny. And even if Billy and Ted, I like Bill and Ted, just referencing the movie, even if Bill and Ted had attended but didn't perform as well, he might say a word or two, but he would almost ignore their efforts of the team. And as a result, they did become a second-class citizen in the club. There was first-class citizens who were people that had competed and won, and everyone else was a second-class citizen, and people that competed and not won, it was even more detrimental for them, because they were like, I tried, but why don't I get my name in the sun? Which probably drove performance for the good people, but as a group, it had a negative impact. It's something you've got to be careful of. Just for the instructor has to keep his eyes open to those things.
You don't want to erode the cohesion of the group. I think if somebody does lose, you can certainly find and highlight some positives that they got from the competition.
One of the things that we've done is we make sure, or previously, we've had someone take a photo, and really specifically, we don't say get a photo of everyone with a trophy. We say get a photo of everyone.
Yeah.
So, irrespective, even in the event, someone probably, if they really didn't perform that well, they probably stood well, or did a great fighting stance, or looked dynamic. And that photo is just as good, and that goes on the Facebook. hey man, you look cool there, cool photo,
Yeah.
which is just as important. So that's for the student, the club. Instructor competing is the next step that we're going to consider. Obviously, if you go in and win both events that you go in, you're fine. But that won't always happen. That's the truth. And whether an instructor should compete or shouldn't is its own argument. But what are some of the comments? Not whether we should or shouldn't do it. We'll do that last. But what are some? Or you can open with that. But what are your thoughts on should compete, shouldn't compete, how to compete?
Yeah, look, I think it depends on the club. So we're a martial arts club that has some people that compete.
Yes.
I don't compete. I'm a bit older, and I teach a lot. Excuse me,
Throat sore. Too many classes.
I'm good. Yeah, I'm responsible for teaching the majority of the class. I'm on the floor for 20, 25 classes a week.
Yeah.
So I can't afford for my students to have me get injured.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think if you're a competition club, you don't necessarily have to compete, but I think having a background of competition and success is probably important if that's the kind of direction you're going to go with driving your club.
Yes.
But I don't think it's a necessity, and I think knowing what kind of club you are is really important.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Your thoughts on the coach competing?
I think it can make and break the respect you get from your students. So
Yes.
if you're a sore winner or a sore loser, can impact the way your students see you. So if you're a sore winner, they think you're top stuff. Like they might go, oh, he thinks he's really good. But if you're a sore loser, then they go, oh, he doesn't know it. Like you can lose the respect of your students.
Yeah.
So the way you win and lose is really important.
Yeah, I think there's actually a risk. Even just being really, really honest, I think if a coach competes and doesn't win, I think there are students that they believe their coach is amazing, and even if you win well, even if you lose well and you're very respectful, you might still lose some respect from that student, from some of those students that just always think that their coach is the winner. And that's I think that's a risk that has to be played out with, particularly with specific sports, but I think that's always there. Once the coach decides to enter that environment, there is that risk that there is a small cohort of students that expect their teacher to always win, and when he doesn't or she doesn't, they're like, oh. There is a small slight against that teacher. And I think that's a risk that the instructor plays, and that's the reality. That's just a real true reality. The other aspect for the coaches are, again, for validation. I think you said if a coach trains a stable or a group of competitors that all perform well, they all win, then that highly validates the instructor. That instructor says, oh, I trained these 10 guys and they're all national champions. Then that's it. The coach is validated. That's it. And that becomes a positive for his coaching environment, for the immediate environment, and maybe a positive for his marketing. And there's a couple of names that come up. John Danaher obviously trained the Danaher Death Squad for grappling, or BJJ, and exceptional reputation. Because of the exceptional results he created. All out of the Henzo Gracie club, but Danaher's name is in my opinion more well recognised than Henzo Gracie's, which is an interesting space. We jump across the other martial arts and you'll see the same thing occurring. So that's the instructor. So instructor competing, big risk, but instructor student competing, also there is a risk there. The other item for consideration is injury. So setting, and the negatives can be an injury to a student,
and that can be career ending. If a student is progressing along and wants to have a long journey and ends up with a really damaged knee or a damaged back or something like that ends it, it's not in the best overall. For the students.
That's bad news.
It's just bad.
That's bad news. And you can't get away from that risk. That's competition. We see that, right? So there's the other risk that you should take. The return investment to run a comp does take time. To have a club attend a comp. Now, you have two choices. You can just tell your students to register online and ignore it, in which case it takes zero effort from the instructor, which I would never recommend.
Mm-hmm.
Second choice is that we do it properly. What are one of the steps? So how much time are we talking? What's one of the steps that you go through, Dima?
Preparing the students. So I don't want to have my student go into a tournament unprepared. I'm
Yep.
setting them up to fail. So I'll run a few training days or classes in the lead up, and this could be months in advance, not just the week before, 2 weeks before. There might be a sparring class we do weekly. Might be a sparring day we might do for a month-to-month basis or every couple of weeks. But these sort of things.
How does a sparring day go for you?
The organisation will be a few hours to get all the communications out, making sure there's time available and who's going to be there.
So it's 2 hours for comms and organisation?
And the day itself goes for about 2 hours. So there's a run.
4 hours? And let's say, so that 4 hours for that comp, and you do how many of those in the lead up to competition? Let's say a 3 month lead up.
I'd say that 4 to 5 is a good number.
4 to 5. We'll do 5 because that works really.
Makes sense.
So 4 hours, 5 sessions, 20 hours. Okay, so you've got 20 hours of sparring days, and you set a sparring class a week.
And a sparring class a week.
There's another 10 to 12. Let's say another 10 hours there. So what did I say? 20. So
30 hours.
30 hours. So you have 30 hours in prep before we even
Go to the event.
do anything. That's on top of. That's not 30 hours of prep. That's 30 hours of prep on top of your normal martial arts teaching and training
Yes.
regime.
The tournament's an additional item, so all the hours are additional. Doesn't replace training.
Yeah, it doesn't replace
Yeah.
training. It's on top.
Yeah.
What else do we need to add to that?
Yeah, well, just for the maths, let's look at another 10 hours just for the day. An hour getting there, an hour getting home, 8 hours on the mats.
Yeah, so there's 10 hours, so we're down at we're at 40 hours. And then, so 40 hours to prep and then run the day. If it's done well, and after that?
After there's a debrief, so you got to reflect on the day, which does take another hour or so. The communications, all the getting back to the students, seeing how they feel afterwards, and all that as well.
And don't forget, you probably, if you're really on top of your game, you've hit all your social media with all that kind of stuff as well.
Social media takes
it's time.
2 hours.
Yes.
2 hours. It depends if you're slow with the with the Insta.
Yeah.
Maybe 5.
Yeah.
So let's say 40. Let's say plus the debrief and a bit of social media time. Let's say 50 hours.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say that. So we can suggest that it takes us about 50 hours to develop and run our guys to an event. Just for other smaller clubs out there, we are particularly lucky. We work as a very close-knit group. So you don't run all of those sparring days, do you?
No, we share.
No, we share. Are you running one?
I've got one this Saturday.
You got one this Saturday. You've done one already.
Yeah, I've done one. I was about a month ago.
No one ago. Did I do one?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah,
Yeah, you did.
I know I did. So for us, we manage that 50 hours in a very different way.
Yeah.
But we can suggest that for if you're a standalone small
It's tough.
club,
It's tough.
if you want to do a comp properly, it's 50 hours.
Yep.
And that 50 hours, it's not 50 hours. It's not 50 hours that's from nowhere. That's 50 hours that gets taken from other training and development for your school. Because that's you got your time allocated to your school and your time allocated to your family. That's not 50 hours from nowhere. That's 50 hours that misses out in other spaces of your
It's 50 hours you're going to find.
You're gonna find. You're gonna shave it off somewhere else.
Yeah.
So we can say 50 hours for a comp, but I think that's fair. So that's the experience for the student, instructor, and the club itself. If done well, positive. If you're not prepared to do it well, don't do it.
Yeah. Be prepared for it to be a negative if you're not going to put the effort in.
Yeah, don't put the effort in, then don't do it because it's a negative. Yeah, 100%. Competitions can be great, but be prepared to put in the time or it will be a negative. And really consider all the aspects of what you should do for that competition and decide if you're going to compete or not.